show me their track record. Well, my track record is one of being involved for a long time up here in North Denver and around the city.
Really long.
Really long time.
I'm still here.
I'm getting older.
I'm getting older. Oh, okay, good. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we moved here, Jane, my wife. I'd like to acknowledge Jane. Where is she? Thank you, honey. I couldn't have. So many of the things that we've done in politics, we've done together. We worked on projects. Like we started a neighborhood group back in 1973 called Northwest Neighbors, along with Ed, Sally, and Tony Trampler. Anybody else here from Northwest Neighbors? But that was the first neighborhood group in Northwest Denver. And then we got involved in the Platte Area Reclamation Committee. You know, there was 500 acres of open space that was railroad land down in the Central Platte Valley, and it was our vision that there ought to be adequate park space, not only for the new development that was going to take place there, but for the development that was taking place in the neighborhoods and for the people in the neighborhoods who were so park deficient. Denver is really park deficient. Even though we're a city of parks, our per capita amount of land for parks is very, very low compared to many cities and certainly in the surrounding area. So the whole idea of parks is something that I got involved with very early on. And we won some battles, we lost most of them, but I think most of the parkland that you see down there today is largely a result of the efforts of the Platte Area Reclamation Committee in trying to keep as much open space as we could in the Platte Valley. And then we got involved in the upper 15th Street area. We kind of moved there. I think Jane was the first one to open her kite store there in 1975. And we moved there because we wanted to keep an eye on the valley. We actually opened a business overlooking it. And we fought for the historic preservation of those buildings along 15th Street. And I actually I remember they were going to rezone those buildings, the historic buildings, from B2 to B4, which would have allowed a lot higher buildings, and they could have torn down the historic buildings. So I went, at the time the property was owned by Francis Vanderburg. Do y'all remember Francis Vanderburg?
Evil man.
A sexual predator, as it turns out, but he liked me.
Watch out!
But he never tried to do anything with me, except, I don't know, I called him up, I said, look, you're going to rezone this property. Would you be willing to put a height covenant on it, put a restriction on top of those buildings? And he said, well, I just want the use. I really don't care about the height, sure. And so there was a covenant put over those buildings that actually helped to preserve those buildings. And then we got involved with the Viking Park. They were going to tear down North High School. And because every other part of town had a new high school, the people up here wanted a new high school. They said, you know, it's ugly, it's terrible, the area is terrible, we want a new high school. And so we said, you know, it's not really, the school is a historic building, it's beautiful. But the problem is that all around it was blight and industrial uses, and the little triangle across the street from North High School was a Rocky built and a Sir Speedy or something like that. It was terrible. And when you came into North Denver, that's what you saw, was this blighted block of buildings, and you couldn't see north and you couldn't see St. Dominic's. And so a group of us, weren't you involved with that too, Ed? No. We got together, we said, you know, if you just clear this block, off, you'll be able to see St. Dominic's and North, and we can provide this beautiful entryway into North Denver. And it took a while.
The boat was already closed.
Yeah, there was all kinds of closed buildings and everything. So we got some of those houses moved off of that block. They actually saved the buildings and moved them elsewhere. And so North High School was saved, and we have this wonderful entryway. We never did get, hey, Don Bain, how are you? Thank you for coming. Anyway, we never did get the Spear Boulevard made into a parkway from the end of the viaduct up to the entryway, but that's something that maybe can be done in the future.
Was that where you found the Golda Meir House and moved it to the Raritan campus?
No, that was much later on.
Yeah. Tell the story, Larry.
Well, I'll do that. I'm going chronological.
at 8 o'clock.
I got a captive audience. I'm sorry. These are my friends, so I'll make it short. Anyway, the next thing that we got involved with was well, there's so many things that we did, but when we moved the kite store, Jane moved the kite store up to, oh, I forgot the theatrical booking agency on 15th too. We had fairs there. We really promoted that area, and as in so many other cities, you know, where the artists come in and promote an area, then the developers come in and we have to move. So then we moved up to 32nd and Perry. And I remember they were going to tear up the streets. And I said, well, as long as you're tearing up the streets, why don't you bury the power lines? So we pushed. They said, well, it can't be done. You know, they always say it can't be done. I insisted. And finally, Excel actually had a little fund with some money in it. And we got the power lines buried along 32nd Avenue. Well, now the Golda Meir House. That was at Auraria. When I was working at Auraria, and Don Bain was involved with that, for sure. The Auraria Foundation was looking for houses to move to the 9th Street Historic Park, and I contacted the people who had the Golda Meir House, Mel and Esther Cohen, who sent a letter to Don Bain. And Don came to me and said, look at this. These people want to move the Golda Meir House. Can you find out if it's appropriate for 9th Street Historic Park? So I called Don and Carolyn Etter. Don had written a book about 9th Street Historic Park. And I said, Don, what do you think about moving the poor Golda Meir House? It had been I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the wandering Jew, but this was a wandering Jewish house. And it had been everywhere. Nobody wanted it. And so we were able to find out that there was a Denver double, almost identical to the Golda Meir House, right next to St. Cassidy's, where we wanted to move it. And so that convinced the Auraria Foundation Board, where Don Bain was, I think Larry Hamilton was the chair at the time, but you were instrumental in getting that done, to actually ask the people if they wanted to bring it to Auraria. And so I spearheaded that project, and as a result of that, that's another interesting little side story, but very quickly, I'll tell you how Golda Meir came to Denver. She wanted to be a school teacher. She was 13 years old, and in Wisconsin, if you were a woman, you couldn't be a school teacher and be married. So her father said, you're not going to be a school teacher. You are going to get married, and I got just the guy for you, Mr. Goodstein. He's 32 years old, he's very handsome, and you're going to marry him. And Golda said, oh my God, I don't want to marry Mr. Goodstein. So she wrote to her sister in Denver, Shana, who was living in this little house on 16th and Julian, and she said, can I come live with you? And she said, you can come, but we don't have any money to bring you here. So she went out on the streets of Milwaukee and taught English to new immigrants for $10 a lesson to raise the money for her train ticket here. And she lowered her suitcase down to her friend the night before she was to leave. She went to the train station, ran away from home, and came to school at North High School. She was a teenage runaway drop-in. And I got a check in the mail from a 95-year-old man named Carl Ginn for $25 for the Golda Meir House. And he said, I went to school with Golda Meir. I think you're doing a great thing. I said, oh my God, somebody who actually knew her. So I went over to see him, and his son, Wally Ginn, had just come back to take care of him. And I told them the story, and they said, oh, that's so, let's start an alumni association around that. Maybe we could start a scholarship fund. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you do that, we'll have a fundraiser, and I'll split the proceeds between the North High School Scholarship Fund and the Golda Meir House. And we did that, and that scholarship fund today at North High School is $475,000.